The storm above Calyx, 9 tore the sky like an open wound, hurling down forked lightning that danced across the atmosphere with a predator's grace. From the observation deck of the Viridian Ark, Captain Celine Ark stared down at the chaos, one gloved hand resting against the transparent hull. She'd seen 1,000 worlds in ruin, but this one radiated something different, something feral and ancient. "Still nothing natural down there," said Lieutenant Commander Harrow, voice taut with the weariness of repeated scans. "Radiation levels consistent with post-nuclear saturation. No known biosignatures." Celine didn't move, and yet we're looking at green. The image on the screen zoomed in. There, nestled among the obsidian rock formations and sulfur-cracked plains, were vibrant patches, clusters of what appeared to be flora. They pulsed faintly in hues of green and gold, like breathing things. "Visual anomaly, maybe a chemical reaction," Harrow offered. "Or something alive," she said. She turned to crew, her voice decisive. "Prep the lander. I'm going down." The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was resignation. When Celine found something strange, she followed it. Always. The shuttle cut through the electric clouds like a spear, its shielding straining against the energy storm. The descent was a blur of turbulence, crimson warning lights, and the thick, low growl of atmospheric resistance. Inside the cramped cabin, Celine sat flanked by 2 researchers and a pair of armed guards, standard for high-risk planetary surveys. They landed in a ravine carved by ancient tectonic violence. The soil underfoot was like powdered glass, and the wind hissed with static. But ahead, just beyond a jagged ridge, the anomaly waited. Celine led the group in silence, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet. She stopped at the first sign of green. It wasn't a plant, not in the traditional sense. The structure had the symmetry of a leaf, yes, but its surface shimmered like insect chitin. Tendrils curled outward in slow, searching motions, as if tasting the air. "Scans are clean," murmured Dr. Vesselin, the younger of the 2 biologists. "No pathogens. But this thing is converting radiation. Actively. Like it's feeding," Harrow added. His voice piped in from the ship above. Celine crouched and placed a gloved hand near the base of the plant. The soil was warm. Not from sunlight, Calyx. 9 hadn't seen light through the clouds in decades, but from something internal. A pulse. Then, behind them, something moved. The guard on point, Rennick, shouted a warning and fired into shadows. The crack of plasma echoed off the rocks. Celine spun, weapon raised. A massive tangle of vines erupted from the ridge wall, moving not like plants, but like muscle. One of the researchers was yanked, screaming, into the darkness. Rennick went after him and vanished. The remaining guard fired wildly, by enough time for Celine and Vesa to retreat behind a slab of basalt. The vines paused at the edge of the clearing, as if respecting an invisible boundary, and then they retracted. Celine's heart pounded in her ears. "They're protecting it," she said. "The plant, whatever it is, it's not alone." Vesa's voice trembled. That wasn't just defense. It was territorial. Back on the shuttle, silence reigned. The lost crew members were marked as casualties. Calyx, 9 had claimed its price. But Celine's mind churned with questions, none more urgent than how. On board the Viridian Ark, she studied the sample Vesa had managed to collect. A tendril tip, still pulsing faintly in containment. The cellular structure was impossibly complex, bearing markers of artificial manipulation. More than that, it was ancient. "The gene sequences are recursive," Vesa reported, eyes wide behind her glasses. "It's like it remembers how to evolve. It's not just adapting, it's choosing." Harrow stood behind them, arms crossed. "That kind of tech doesn't evolve naturally. Someone made this." "Or something," Celine murmured. The deeper they scanned, the more unsettling it became. The flora wasn't just converting radiation into energy. It was producing oxygen, creating soil, neutralizing toxins. It was terraforming. That word hung in the air like a sentence. Celine sat alone later that cycle, in her dimly lit quarters, watching the silent planet spin on the monitor. The word terraforming brought back too much. She saw again the red sands of Desmere, for the colony her parents had built with hope and iron. A failed terraforming sequence had poisoned the air, and she had walked alone for days among bodies that hadn't decomposed. She became a surveyor not to escape death, but to understand it, to find out why life failed where it should have thrived. Calyx, 9 was different. It had died, but someone was trying to bring it back. She authorized another mission. This time beneath the surface. Using gravitic drills, they descended through layers of dead crust. At 2 kilometers, they found it, a structure embedded in stone and root. A vast biomechanical cathedral, alive and humming. Its walls were ribbed with organic fiber, breathing slowly, like lungs. At the center, a single figure stood. It was humanoid, though its skin was bark-like and pale as ash. Roots trailed from its limbs, merging with the floor. Its eyes opened slowly as they approached. No hostility, no fear. And then it sang, not in words, but in tones. A low, melodic series of vibrations that passed through the body like sound through water. The vines in the chamber moved gently with the rhythm, responding like instruments. The researchers froze, instruments recording, but minds stunned. Celine alone stepped forward, hands open. "Who are you?" she whispered. The figure tilted its head. It did not reply in language, but something passed between them, a knowing, like warmth beneath the ice. On the surface, the sky had begun to change. The storm slowed. The clouds, so long thick with ash and static, began to thin. The Viridian arc reported a second anomaly. Another patch of green. Then another. Celine stood there in the breathing heart of the world, watching the impossible unfold, and knew this was not colonization. This was resurrection. Something ancient, something deliberate, had returned to tend the wounds of a murdered planet. But the question that haunted her, even as all bloomed in her chest like a flower, was simple. Who planted the first seed? The storm was gone, not dispersed by wind or weakened by time, but dismantled, taken apart like an engine disassembled with impossible care. What had once been endless electric turbulence now rippled with strange stillness. From the bridge of the Viridian Arc, the crew watched as shafts of weak, gray light broke through, touching the surface of Calyx, 9 for the first time in centuries. Celine Arc stood at the central console, fingers curled around its edge. There was no protocol for this. No regulation prepared a captain for a world that healed itself. Telemetry confirms oxygen output is up 3% planet-wide, Harrow said. His voice had lost its skepticism and now balanced on disbelief. Atmospheric toxins are down. It's real. Celine nodded but didn't speak. Her thoughts were still in the chamber below, still echoing with the unspoken song that had come from the rooted figure. They had not tried to communicate in any conventional way. No signals, no machines, only resonance, only song. She had felt something when the tones passed through her. A presence, yes, but also an invitation. Back in the containment lab, the sample from the vine had grown. It now curled like a sleeping animal inside its pod, sensitive to light and movement. It didn't resist containment, but it wasn't inert either. "It's responding to proximity," said Dr. Lin, watching the reading spike as she passed her hand over the pod. "This thing wants to be seen." Celine stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Or it wants to see us." The next day, they returned to the underground structure. This time, Celine brought fewer people. Vessel Lin came, along with Harrow, who had stopped protesting, and started listening. The figure was still there, rooted, unmoving, and aware. As they approached, the song began again. But this time, something changed. The roots stirred, and a section of the wall opened, not with force, but with intention. It parted like a curtain made of petals, revealing a chamber lit from within. Celine entered first. Inside was no machinery, no weapon, no throne. Only a grove. Tall stalks swayed though there was no wind, and a low ambient hum saturated the air. Each plant emitted faint pulses of bioluminescent color, greens, blues, golds, blinking in patterns. "Not light," Vessa murmured. "Language." Celine stepped closer to one of the plants, and the pulse shifted. The color deepened to amber, and she felt her vision swim. Not dizziness, but a pulling, like memory being yanked to the surface. She staggered and gripped a nearby vine for balance. She was no longer in the chamber. She was in a wasteland. Calyx, 9, but long ago, a charred world scorched by orbital bombardment. Stripped of life. Black towers broken in half like brittle bones. And then something small. A single sprout, pale and weak, pushing through the ashes. One of the gardeners knelt beside it, hands in the soil, not planting, but listening. Their touch was reverent. The scene flickered forward. More sprouts. More gardeners. They did not build. They did not speak. They simply nurtured. And slowly, green returned. Then came fire. Ships like wasps in the sky. Steel raining down. The gardeners burned. Again and again. They did not fight. They returned. Celine gasped and broke contact. She looked at Vesa. They're not invaders. They're caretakers. They fix what we destroy. Harrow remained near the entrance, rigid. That's a beautiful story, Captain. But who's to say what they really want? Maybe they're just patient colonizers. No, Vesa said quietly. They've been here long before us. They're not building empires. They're cultivating memory. Celine knelt beside another plant and let it pulse against her palm. The memory was different this time, personal. A child's face, a lost parent, the unbearable silence of grief made tangible through color and tone. They store memory in the living things, she whispered. Not data, feeling. Outside, the transformation accelerated. Entire valleys turned green overnight. Old battle scars in the terrain healed into terraces of moss and root. It was as if the world exhaled. But then came the signal. Harrow intercepted it first. A tight beam pulse from the outer system. Incoming fleet. Human, not ours. Celine's mouth hardened. Who? Halion Trade Authority. Looks like they flagged our discovery logs. They're en route. Weapons hot. Vesa paled. They'll see this place as a biological threat. Celine nodded grimly. Or an opportunity. She paced the bridge, thoughts racing. The gardeners wouldn't defend themselves. That much was clear. They refused to harm. But the Viridian Ark could. Harrow stood in her path. If we stand in their way, we're in violation of 5 articles of interstellar law. You know that. Celine stopped inches from him. Then it's time we chose what matters more, law or life. The next move had to be careful. She knew from experience that no message of peace could compete with fear in the minds of those who profited from war. The gardener's silence would be their death sentence unless she found a voice loud enough to reach beyond it. That night, she returned alone to the underground grove. The rooted figure stood as it always had, its eyes closed, its presence ancient and unwavering. Celine stepped close and whispered, "You don't fight, but I can." A tendril touched her temple, and the room dimmed. In the dark, she saw stars, galaxies blooming and dying in silence. She saw Earth from afar, not as a place of origin, but as another wound. And she saw the gardeners, again and again, returning to dust and ash with their quiet defiance. They had no armies, no banners, only patience and green things. The tendril withdrew. When she opened her eyes, she felt it. Not power, but conviction. She returned to the ship and gave the order. Prepare the satellite arrays. Broadcast the signal she had heard from the grove. The song, the pulse, the memory. Are we warning them? Harrow asked. No, she said. We're telling them. This world belongs to something older than war, and we will not let you take it. The fleet would arrive in 4 days. The roots of Calyx, 9 were ready. And so was she. The Helion fleet pierced the edge of Calyx 9 system, like a lance aimed at the heart of resurrection. Celine stood on the observation platform of the Viridian Ark, arms folded, gaze fixed on the tactical holomap. 32 ships, heavily armed. Their IFF codes marked them as private security vessels under guise of scientific reclamation. She knew better. Helion didn't explore. Helion consumed. They'll be in orbit within 30 hours, Harrow said, his voice devoid of its usual doubt. The moment had burned that away. They're not slowing. No attempt at communication. They don't need to talk, Celine replied. They already believe they own it. Vessa Lynn entered the bridge, clutching a datapad and barely containing the tremor in her voice. The gardeners know. I think they've always known this was coming. Celine turned toward her. How? I went back to the grove. The plants, they've stopped blooming. The bioluminescent signals have gone into a different rhythm. Less language, more warning. Harrow frowned. You're saying the plants are afraid? No, Vessa said quietly. They're preparing. The containment lab had changed overnight. The single vine sample, once reactive but passive, now arched within its pod like a coiled serpent. Its growth had accelerated exponentially. Tendrils pressed against the transparent casing, not in aggression, but seeking contact. When Celine placed her palm on the glass, it calmed, pulsing softly. What if this isn't just terraforming? She asked aloud. What if it's defense on a planetary scale? No one answered. The next step came not from command, but instinct. She ordered a transmission, a live broadcast, not to Helion, not yet, but to every neutral listening post and observatory in the quadrant. She uploaded the grove's harmonics, the visuals of regeneration, the memory-infused pulses. Let them see what was at stake before it was lost. Transmission away, said Harrow, reluctantly. You just painted a target on us. I'd rather be a target, Celine said, than an accomplice. They descended again, this time with caution sharpened by desperation. The grove no longer welcomed them with song. It was still and dark, the plants dimmed like shuttered lanterns. Yet the presence of the rooted figure remained, silent, resolute, unyielding. Celine approached it, heart thudding. If you understand me, if you can still hear, they are coming. They will burn this world to cinders. The figure opened its eyes. The glow within them was dimmer than before, like an ember dying in a storm. Then, without sound, it extended one hand, its bark flesh cracking open along lines of golden sap. Something emerged. A seed. Small. Black. Matte. It vibrated in the air as if containing the gravity of a collapsed star. Celine reached out. The moment her fingers closed around it, a pulse lanced through her spine. Images, emotions, the pressure of entire ecosystems compressed into a singular will. She staggered, gasped. Vessa caught her. What is it? Harrow asked. Celine turned the seed in her palm. A key, a weapon, a promise. They returned to the ship. The crew, once skeptical, now moved with grim purpose. The first Helion scout vessel dropped into low orbit 2 hours later. The Viridian Ark hailed it. The message was simple. This world is under protection. You have no jurisdiction. Withdraw. No reply. Instead, atmospheric scanners picked up a kinetic missile, a probe strike, aimed at the grove's location. Silent, fast, devastating. Celine stared at the screen, jaw set. Deploy the defense net. Dozens of satellite drones launched from the Viridian Ark, aligning into a web of electromagnetic interference. The probe was intercepted mid-descent, detonating harmlessly in the upper stratosphere. Helion responded immediately. The main fleet advanced. Celine walked into the containment chamber and stared at the seed. We can't stop them all with tech. But we have this. Vessa's face was pale. We don't know what it does. It could kill the planet trying to save it. Celine looked at her, something hard burning in her eyes. The planet chose to trust me. I'm trusting it back. She took the seed down to the surface, alone, as her shuttle landed near the grove. The earth around it seemed to breathe. Roots shifted. Clouds thickened. The rooted figure waited, silent. Celine approached, and without hesitation, knelt and pressed the seed into the earth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a tremor. The vines recoiled across the terrain, moving not in fear but with sudden purpose. The soil split open in patterns. Ancient lines etched themselves anew across the landscape, glyphs of light and life. Above, the first Helion warship descended from a grove. Pillars of green light erupted into the sky. They coiled, twisted, converged. At their center, the air shimmered, and something stepped out. It was not a gardener. It was what they guarded, a towering form of root and mineral, shaped like a creature built from the memory of forests. Its eyes were twin galaxies, its hands like branches reaching toward forgotten suns. Celine backed away slowly. She felt awe, terror, reverence. The creature looked upward, and the sky screamed. Hillion's lead cruiser opened fire. The grove answered. Lightning wove through roots, arced into the atmosphere, lashing through the cruiser's hull. Metal ruptured. Systems fried. The ship buckled midair and fell like a wounded predator into the hills. But more were coming. Celine activated her comm. Begin evacuation of the low orbit array. They'll target us next. Harrow's voice came through, shaky. What the hell was that thing? A Guardian, she said, eyes still locked on the Green Titan. A memory made flesh. And it's not done. Above, as Hillion's remaining ships restructured their assault pattern, Celine knew they would not stop. But now, neither would the Garden. The war for Calyx. 9 had begun. The battlefield was not forged in steel, but in root and rhythm. From orbit, Calyx, 9 shimmered with unnatural life. Tendrils of green coalesced in spiraling patterns across the surface, luminous and shifting like veins in a colossal, awakening organism. The grove had not summoned an army. It had become one. Celine stood on the command deck of the Viridian Ark, lit only by emergency lumens. The ship's main power had been diverted to sustain the planetary shield interface, a tenuous electromagnetic bridge between vessel and vegetation. Beneath her boots, the ship thrummed with shared purpose, as though it too had surrendered to the planet's will. Harrow, bruised and hollow-eyed, approached with the data slate clutched tight. They've lost another cruiser. Second Fleet is holding at high orbit. They're scanning for a weak point in the defense lattice. It's only a matter of time. Celine didn't look at him. Her eyes remained locked on the hologram of the grove, where the Guardian, taller now, adorned in bark and biolite, strode silently across the ravaged foothills, its every step birthing foliage. They won't stop because they don't believe this is real. Not until we make them feel it. They're hell-eye-on, Harrow muttered. They don't feel. They calculate. Vessel Lynn entered the deck, her expression unreadable. She carried another sample, the last viable spore node, retrieved from the shattered edge of the grove before the bombardments resumed. It pulsed weakly, its bioluminescence flickering like a dying heartbeat. I've synced it with the ship's primary comms relay, she said. If we amplify it harmonics through the transspatial ray, we can override the Helion command net. Not long, just enough to insert a memory. Celine turned. You want to infect them? Vessa nodded. Not with code. With truth. Let them see what we saw. Let them remember. Harrow stared at the spore, broadcasting alien psychic imprint to hostile ships. Sounds like a court-martial waiting to happen. Celine met his gaze. If this works, there won't.